Before we start, if you're new here, subscribe. And if by the end of this video you recognize yourself in what we're talking about, go ahead and like it now, in advance. It helps this content reach the people who need it most right now. Things are finally going well. The relationship feels right. The job is coming together. You finish something you're proud of. For the first time in a while, you wake up and there's no dread waiting for you at the edge of the bed. And then, slowly, almost invisibly, you start to ruin it. You pick a fight that didn't need to happen. You stop showing up the way you were showing up. You say something that pushes the other person exactly far enough away. You procrastinate on the thing that matters most until the deadline dies. You don't plan it. You don't even notice it happening at first. But if you look back honestly, you are doing it to yourself. This isn't weakness. It isn't self-destruction for the sake of it. It's one of the most common, least talked about patterns in human psychology. And once you understand what's actually driving it, you'll never unsee it. Hey, before we go further, if this is already sounding like you, do me a favor. Hit like on this video right now in advance. You haven't even seen it all yet, but trust me, and it genuinely helps us keep making more of this. Press the bell so you don't miss what comes next, and leave a comment, even just one word, so we know we're not alone in this. It means more than you think. Okay, let's go. Psychologists call it self-sabotage, but that word makes it sound deliberate, like some part of you wants to fail. That's not quite right. What's actually happening is something older and stranger and more human than that. It usually starts with a feeling you can barely name. Things are good, too good maybe, and somewhere beneath the surface, not in your thoughts, not in your conscious awareness, your nervous system registers something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar to your nervous system is not the same as good. Unfamiliar is threat. Think about what happens in your body when things start going well for the first time in a long time. There's a version of excitement, but underneath it, tension, a low-grade vigilance, the part of you that's waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because in your history, maybe things going well was followed by loss, by disappointment, by having something taken, by someone leaving. So your system learned, the better it gets, the harder the fall. And it developed a strategy, not a conscious one, a cellular one. Stay close to what you know. Don't let it get too good, because if you don't climb too high, you can't fall too far. The psychologist Gay Hendricks called this the upper limit problem. He noticed that every person has an internal thermostat, a set point for how much good they're allowed to feel, how much success, love, joy, ease. And when you exceed that set point, when life gives you more than your system thinks you're allowed to have, you unconsciously pull the temperature back down. You start an argument with the person you love. You miss the deadline. You say the thing you can't unsay. You drink too much the night before the important morning. You don't choose this, but it happens again and again and again. And the cruelest part is that it looks, from the outside, like self-destruction. Like you don't want good things, like something is wrong with you. But that's not it. You have a thermostat that was set a long time ago, and it's doing exactly what it was calibrated to do. Here's where it gets specific. There are a few core mechanisms behind self-sabotage, and most people are running one or two of them without knowing it. The first is what we just touched on, fear of loss. When something good arrives, a relationship, an opportunity, a version of your life that actually works, the immediate emotional response isn't just joy. It's exposure. You now have something to lose. And for people who've experienced significant loss, early or suddenly or repeatedly, the nervous system reacts to, I have something precious, by beginning to prepare for the moment it disappears. Not consciously, not as a plan, just as a pulse in the background. Protect yourself, get out in front of it. Leave before you're left, fail before you're failed. Sabotage becomes a form of preemptive grief. The second mechanism is deeper. It's not just fear of loss. It's the question underneath the loss. Do I deserve this? This is the one nobody wants to look at. Because it doesn't feel like a question. It feels like a fact. For people who grew up in environments where love was conditional, where approval had to be earned, where care arrived inconsistently, the nervous system internalized something early. Good things come with conditions, and I'm not sure I've met them. So when good things arrive unconditionally, when someone loves you without you having to perform for it, when success comes without extreme suffering, when ease arrives and you didn't bleed for it, something in you doesn't trust it. Because you've never had a template for good things that simply stay. This is the nervous system's logic. What I've had before, I know how to survive. The anxiety I grew up with, I know that landscape. The loneliness, the uncertainty, the good things that didn't last, I have a map for all of it. But this ease, this love, this working, I don't have a map for this. And without a map, the brain defaults to danger. Not because good is bad, but because unfamiliar is unsafe. And your system will always choose the familiar version of suffering over the unfamiliar version of joy. The third mechanism is identity. We all carry an internal story about who we are, and that story was written early, by the patterns we survived, the roles we played, the way we were seen. If that story says, I am someone who struggles, then the moment things stop struggling, something feels off. Not wrong exactly, off. Like you're playing a character that isn't yours. And the mind does something remarkable in that moment. It starts looking for evidence that the old story is still true. It finds problems where there weren't problems. It reads messages as more hostile than they are. It hears criticism and praise. Not because you're broken, because you're trying to stay consistent with who you believe yourself to be. The brain hates cognitive dissonance more than it hates suffering. So what does self-sabotage actually look like? Because it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's the email you never send, the conversation you keep finding reasons to delay, the plan that's fully formed in your head and somehow never moves. Sometimes it's the subtle withdrawal, becoming slightly less available, slightly less warm, slightly harder to reach, until the other person pulls back too. Sometimes it's the way you talk about the good thing before it's confirmed, already adding doubt, already preparing people for the possibility that it won't work, already grieving in advance. Sometimes it's perfectionism, holding the thing to such an impossible standard that it can never actually be finished, can never be judged, can never be rejected. Because if it's never done, it's never failed. Here's what makes this pattern so hard to interrupt. It doesn't feel like fear. It doesn't feel like self-destruction. Most of the time, it feels completely reasonable, justified, even wise. The story you tell yourself sounds like, I'm just being realistic. I've been burned before. I'm protecting myself. I'm not getting my hopes up. And there's a part of that, a small part, that's actually healthy. Caution isn't pathology. Protecting yourself isn't always self-sabotage. But there's a point where the protection costs more than the threat ever would have, where the wall you built to keep pain out is also keeping everything else out, where the distance you maintain to stay safe is exactly the distance that makes you lonely. There's also something important happening in relationships specifically. When you've grown up in environments where closeness wasn't safe, where the people who were supposed to be reliable weren't, you develop what's called an insecure attachment style. And in adulthood, that shows up in a very specific way. The closer someone gets, the more real the love becomes, the more your system activates. Not with joy, with threat. Because love for you has historically come with cost, with strings, with the fear of what happens when it eventually ends. Because in your experience, it always eventually ended. So you do something subtle but devastating. You test it, unconsciously. You push slightly, pull back slightly, create small crises to see if they'll stay, become slightly more difficult, slightly less available, slightly harder to love, just to see if the love is conditional. And sometimes, in that testing, you push hard enough that you get the answer you feared all along. Not because you wanted to lose them, but because you needed to know. This is where the roots are, not in some fundamental flaw in who you are, not in bad luck or poor choices, in something that happened very early, before you had words for it, before you had any way to understand it. A parent who was inconsistent with warmth, a home environment where stability wasn't stable, a moment of loss that arrived before you were built to process it. The child you were adapted, created a survival system, learned what was safe to want, what was dangerous to hope for, what kinds of good things were real and which ones would be taken. That child was not wrong to do this. That child was brilliant. That child did exactly what a child without other options does: survived. But the survival system doesn't know you're no longer that child. It doesn't update automatically. It runs the old programming in the new life, and the mismatch is what you experience as sabotage. So what changes? Not willpower, not deciding to stop. What changes is awareness, specific, honest, in-the-moment awareness of what's happening before the behavior completes. Because self-sabotage lives in the gap between impulse and action. And the goal isn't to eliminate the impulse, it's to widen the gap, to get good enough at noticing the pattern that you can see it forming. Feel the familiar pull toward destruction, and have 1 second of pause before you act on it. Just 1 second, not 10 minutes of reflection. 1 second of, I recognize this feeling. I've been here before. This is the upper limit. This is the thermostat trying to cool me back down. That second is everything. Because in that second, you're not operating from the old programming. You're operating from a part of yourself that can see the programming. And what you can see, you have a chance to choose. This doesn't mean the feelings go away. The fear of loss doesn't vanish. The question, do I deserve this, doesn't disappear overnight. The old identity story doesn't evaporate. But you stop automatically handing control to them. There's a specific practice that helps here. When things start going well, when you notice yourself in a moment of ease, of connection, of things working, pause and name it. Not dramatically, just internally. This is good. I'm noticing it's good. And I'm noticing the part of me that's already preparing for it to end. Both things can be true at once. You can feel the goodness and observe the fear of it simultaneously. You don't have to choose between them. What you're doing is building a new experience of good things, helping your nervous system create a new data point. I was in something good, and I noticed it, and I didn't destroy it, and it didn't destroy me. In relationships, the work looks specific. When you feel the pull to withdraw, when closeness starts triggering the familiar anxiety, instead of acting on it, name it. Not necessarily out loud to the other person, just to yourself. I'm feeling the urge to create distance. This is the pattern. This is not evidence of a problem in the relationship. This is my system doing what it learned to do. And then, not always, but sometimes, stay. Stay in the discomfort of closeness for 5 more minutes, for 1 more conversation, for the rest of the meal. Tolerating intimacy, actually allowing someone to be close when every old signal says pull back, is one of the most radical things you can do. In work and creative life, it looks different. The sabotage there is usually about the moment before completion. The project that's 90% done and then stalls. The email draft that's been sitting for a week. The application that's ready but somehow never sent. In those moments, the question to ask isn't, why am I procrastinating? The question is, what happens after I send this? What becomes possible? And what becomes possible to lose? Because often the block isn't laziness. It's the exposure that comes with completion. Finished means judgeable. Sent means rejectable. Done means people can now see it and decide. And for someone whose earliest experiences of being seen were painful, being seen, even for something good, can feel like threat. One of the most useful reframes for this work is to stop treating self-sabotage as a character flaw and start treating it as outdated information. The programming running underneath this behavior made perfect sense once. It protected you. It helped you navigate a situation you didn't have the tools to navigate differently. You're not broken. You're running software that was written for a different operating environment. And the work, the slow, non-linear, imperfect work, is updating it. Here's something that helps. Notice the specific flavor of your sabotage. Because it's not random. The way you self-sabotage follows a pattern, your pattern. It has a signature. Maybe it's always in relationships, right at the point where something becomes real. Maybe it's always in work, right before you finish something that matters. Maybe it's always when visibility increases, when more people are paying attention, and the weight of being seen becomes too much. When you can identify the specific trigger, the specific threshold where the old programming kicks in, you can watch for it, anticipate it, meet it with recognition, instead of confusion. Oh, here's the moment. I know this moment. This is where I usually, and then sometimes not this time. The people most likely to self-sabotage are often the most self-aware, the most sensitive, the ones who feel things most deeply and process the world most carefully. Because the pattern doesn't emerge from numbness. It emerges from having felt too much, too early, without the support to metabolize it. The child who learned to self-sabotage was a child who cared deeply, genuinely, almost unbearably about connection, about being loved, about the good things they could see but couldn't quite keep. The relationship you're most likely to sabotage is the one that matters most. The project you're most likely to abandon is the one you care about most deeply. The life you're most likely to undermine is the one you actually want. This is not irony. This is the logic of the system. The higher the stakes, the more you want something, the louder the protection system activates. Because the more you could gain, the more you could lose. Knowing this doesn't make the pull go away, but it makes it legible. And legible is the beginning of choice. There's a question that can help in the moment when the sabotage begins. Not, why am I doing this? The better question is, what am I protecting right now? And does it still need protecting? Because at the root of every act of self-sabotage is a protection impulse, something being guarded. And more often than not, the protection is outdated. The war ended, and you're standing guard over an empty room. I want to say something to the part of you that recognizes this pattern and feels shame about it. You are not weak for having learned to sabotage the good things. You learned this in a time and a place where it made sense, where it was the best available strategy, where a more vulnerable version of you needed protection. And this was how protection arrived. Be patient with the person who built the wall. They were doing the only thing they knew how to do. The work now is not tearing down the wall in anger. It's learning carefully, brick by brick, to build a door. You were not designed to suffer. The suffering was adaptive, but survival was never meant to be the ceiling. There is a version of you that can hold good things, that can stay when the pull to leave comes, that can finish the things, send the email, remain in the love, let the ease be ease. That version isn't someone different. It's you, with more information, more understanding, more room. If something in this video landed, if there was a moment where you thought, that's me, subscribe, there's more coming, and press the bell so you actually see it when it does. Thank you for being here, and for being honest enough with yourself to watch something like this. The good things are real. You are allowed to have them. Go let something stay.